Good afternoon, everybody from Western PA. This is Brian from the Angel Dog Podcast. I took a little sabbatical over the summer for many reasons, and now I'm back on a series where I'm going to be having conversations and interviews with, keeping with the Angel Dog series, people who have contributed to society, to community, to the state, to the federal. I know it's a tough word to say these days, right? In war, domestic, whatever. You can be a doctor, you can be a nurse, you can be a policeman, you can be a firefighter, soldier, and a sailor like we have here. So today, my guest is, and I am profoundly honored to have him, and I got him through a mutual law enforcement friend, is Faher Chuck Pollak. And I hope I'm saying that correctly, Faher Pollak.
Pollak.
Pollak. Okay, Pollak. Pollak. And you can, the audience, you can Google him and he will come up and you will see a bio. It's very interesting. And the first thing I'm going to do is do a real quick thing and test Faher Pollak on his favorite music. Let's see if this comes through. Do you recognize that, sir?
Well, I don't hear it, Brian, but my favorite music is classical music, and my all-time favorite classical music is Tchaikovsky's Concerto in D major.
Well, that's what I had playing here, and obviously it didn't come through. I don't know why it didn't come through, but I looked into how you say that, Tchaikovsky? Tchaikovsky, violin concert in D major. Am I right?
Yes. Yes.
And did a little homework on that, and that comes up written in or performed, I guess written and performed 1878.
Yes.
1878, and
it was just a little bit before I was born.
Just a little bit. And audience, as you can tell, I'm no spring chicken, but Faher Pollak is a couple decades ahead of me. And Faher, you are 94? 94. Yes. Absolutely honored. So I think a lot of people my age, baby boomers, and you're the pre-baby boomer, we're gonna listen to every word you have to say because I'm sure there's words of wisdom. So a little bit background on Faher Pollak. Chuck Pollak is his name. He is originally from Michigan, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And he went to the Naval Academy after his initial schooling, and he graduated class of 52. And in that class, there were 1,083 graduates. Am I correct?
No, I don't think so, Brian. My recollection is that we had just under 1,000. It was
just under 1,000. Okay. Well, maybe that's
about 900.
900. And again, not being a man of the U.S. Navy myself, you come out of the Naval Academy, Faher, as a ensign, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And do you get a choice of assignment, or is that assigned to you?
No, we got a choice of assignments, and I chose a destroyer that was operated out of Norfolk, Virginia.
And what was the name of that destroyer?
Holder. Holder.
So this is 52. Was that destroyer commissioned during World War II?
That was commissioned during World War II, yes.
Okay. And how long did you spend there, Faher?
I spent just a year and became the gunnery officer on the ship. And the thing that was really rather dramatic about that was that my first captain, when I reported aboard, was a man named George Street III.
Okay.
And George Street was one of 4 submarine captains in World War II who had won the Congressional Medal of Honor and lived to tell about it.
My goodness. Hold that right there for the audience. So I'm going to speed ahead a little bit here. And the reason that the good Faher here is bringing that up is because eventually Faher Pollak became a captain in the arena of nuclear submarines. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, let me, before we move on with your naval career, what was the motivation, Faher? What was there a mentor? What got you into the Naval Academy, the thought of it?
Well, I grew up during World War II.
Okay.
When the war started, I was 11 years old. My sister was 6 years older than me, and a number of her classmates immediately enlisted in the various services.
Hmm.
And I got a chance to meet some of them. And the ones that I particularly liked were the ones that had gone into the Navy. But also, my dad in 1939 had gotten our first boat that we kept on Lake St. Clair, which is a part of the Great Lakes system. And I had loved being out on the water and
Okay.
steering the boat, learning how to handle it. So when I got into high school, I decided I wanted to go to the Naval Academy.
Okay, very good. Let's talk about Dad now. Wait a minute. Give me a little background on Senior, Mr.
Yeah.
Pollak.
Yeah, my dad was a combat veteran in World War I.
Okay.
He actually lied to get into the army because he was underage, but his mother allowed him to do that,
Wow.
and he became a battlefield medic for the 35th Division. And he fought in all of the major wars that the U.S. engaged in World War I. My dad saw some awful bad combat, and he didn't like to talk about it. In fact, it wasn't until probably 6 or 8 months before he died that he finally told me a few of the things that had happened to him.
And
He
Father
Go
Pollak,
ahead.
did you ask him or did he volunteer? On
He
that information.
volunteered it.
Okay.
And for the first time, I began to understand why he had been so affected by the combat that he had gone through, and I understood also why he had been reluctant for me to go into the military.
So your dad, Senior Mr. Pollak, saw combat at the ground level.
Yes,
And being a medic, Lord have mercy. Okay, so he survives combat of World War One. I'm just reiterating, make sure we got it right here. And what did he do for a living when he
he became after the war. He decided to go to Detroit because Detroit had the automobile industry beginning, and he
okay?
thought that would be a good town to go to. And he went to Wayne University and got it was Wayne College in those days, and got a business degree and became a certified public accountant.
Wow, from a combat medic to a CPA.
Yes, and
Wow.
he was one of the very early ones in Michigan. I think his number was less than 200, his license number.
And he and he did a career in that.
Yes,
That's incredible.
he he
And
went back with the government, U.S. government, World War II, because they had been trying to get professional people to serve the government in the event that we got into World War II. Dad had agreed to do that. And so he became a very high executive in what was called the Reconstruction Finance Corporation. And they were the ones that gave the contracts and supervised the war production process.
incredible. And did he ever try to stop you from or deter you from your naval career?
He was cool toward the idea and tried to suggest that I needed to do something else.
Okay.
He was particularly thinking I might become a doctor. But when it became clear to him that I really wanted to go to the Naval Academy and be a naval officer, he became very supportive and did all he could to help me.
And at that time, when you were in the Naval Academy, Fall Pollak, wasn't Korea underway?
No,
Was it ended?
Korea, well, yes, right at the end of the thing, Korea, as I recall,
Mm-hmm.
broke out in either 1950 or 1951.
Mm-hmm.
So when I first went to the academy in 1948, we had no wars, but we did get into Korea while I was at the academy.
Okay. So you knew that there's a possibility you obviously could be in harm's way. I mean, you knew that.
Yes.
That's kind of a given. Sometimes we think about that, but you knew that was
Yeah, and we had a couple of my classmates who went in the Marine Corps who were killed in Korea.
I got you. Ahead of you.
Yeah, well, they were in my class. They were classmates of mine.
You okay, got a USN. Okay, got it. By the way, I forgot to mention that My father got into World War II at the end of World War II. He's a boatsman's mate. Right at
Okay.
the end. So you know what that says.
Those are important people at our
Yeah,
ships.
yes. I think what he means is he was a grunt. Okay, but I get it. I got you. I got you. All right. So we got the setting there. So you had any other siblings? Any other
Yes,
siblings?
I had the older sister that I mentioned, who was
Okay.
6 years older. I had a brother who was 2 years younger, and his name was Bob or Robert.
Mhm.
And he decided to follow me into the Naval Academy. He graduated in 1955, 3 years behind me,
Wow.
and then he went into submarines also. Got a master's degree at MIT and became an engineering duty officer. But unfortunately, he contracted Hodgkin's disease at
Oh,
a quite young age, and it led to him having to be medically discharged from the Navy as a lieutenant commander.
oh my. And he got his master's while in the Navy at MIT?
Yes.
Follow Pollak, audience, we haven't had a chance to go this depth in our phone conversations. And I would say you have a gene pool. I'm just guessing here, but I would say you have a gene pool. Is that your Studley picture over your head behind you?
That's my submarine picture. That's when I
Wow.
was in command of my submarine.
You were
Yes.
definitely in command, no question about it. Look at that picture. How old, if I may, without becoming emotional, but how old was your father when he passed?
My dad was 79.
79 and what year? Just kind of curious
It
about
was
the
in
longevity.
1980.
1980. So that's probably above. I don't have my statistics in front of me, but what I'm getting at is a longevity gene. You know what I'm saying? Uh,
Well, my family actually is not long lived. I'm the
okay.
oldest one in the last several generations.
Nobody
But
close.
most of my family died in their very late 70s or early 80s.
Okay. And your mom?
My mother died when she was 78.
78. Well, at that time, that's still was there a big difference in age between dad and mom?
No, just a couple years.
Okay. That's still up there. I mean, that's still you're looking back in time. Did so your brother unfortunately contracted that disease, and that was it for him. So take us through your naval career now. Let's go back. Got a little bit of base on you now. Let's go back to where you're on the destroyer, you become a gunnery position, and let's take us from there.
Well, uh, when Captain Streets left our ship, he
Okay.
took command of a submarine division in Norfolk, the same place where we were home ported.
Mhm.
And as he was leaving, he talked to a number of us and said, "You people are on an anti submarine warfare destroyer. I'm going to be in command of 5 submarines. You might like to go and take a ride on one and see how they operate because that way you might be better officers on the ship." Well, I thought that was a great idea. So
Was
in
that how simple?
January,
Is that how simple he put it? I mean, is
yes,
that really how simple?
yes, that's
Okay.
exactly how he
Okay.
put it.
Okay. Go ahead.
And so I went to him in January when we were going to be in port for a couple of weeks, and asked him if I could get a ride, and he said yes. And he got me a ride for a week on an old World War II submarine called the Raquin. And
Not a nuclear by any chance. Old
oh
school.
no, there were no nuclear submarines in
Okay.
those
And
days.
how old were you and what was your rank at that point?
I was an ensign,
Okay.
and I was about 21 or 22 years
Okay. Yeah.
old.
Single
Yes,
married? Single married?
yes, single.
Okay, gotcha.
So I rode on this old World War II submarine, and I absolutely loved it. I was impressed with the quality of the officers and the men, the
Wow.
camaraderie that they obviously had for each other, the easy discipline, but very effective discipline that they had on the ship. And so when I got back in after a week on the submarine, I put in my request for submarine school, and I
Okay.
was selected on the first try. And so I entered submarine school in 1953, just 1 year out of the academy.
Wow, that's moving pretty fast. Now, when you get into submarine school, uh, is that an aptitude? Is there a test? Is it a matter of making it through it? Is it obviously something you want to do? I get that, but what's the procedure as far as being a student getting into it?
Well, basically, it's how well you have done,
Okay.
and whether or not they think that you have the attributes for it.
And does somebody
With
recommend you? Do you have to be recommended? You have to be recommended?
I had to be recommended by my commanding officer, yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I had to also be a qualified officer of the deck underway,
Okay.
and have operated as an officer of the deck in maneuvers. So I had done all that.
Father, at that point in your career, right there, I want you to take you back now, because there's a lot of stuff here that a lot of us need to hear. Even though myself, I'm semi-retired, looking back over my career, there'll be a lot of my buddies watching this. What was your vision of where you were going in the Navy at that point? What did you, at 23 years old, what were you thinking you were going to do?
Well, I was primarily thinking about getting a ship command someday.
Ship command, okay.
But like almost all of us that had gone to the Naval Academy, we had dreams of maybe becoming an admiral someday.
Admiral, okay, that's right. I figured I wrote your ranks down there, so I wanted to see where that was at your point in time. Okay, so you get to the submarine school, then what?
Well, I got sent then to uh, two diesel submarines because, again, we still didn't have any nuclear submarines operating in the fleet. And the first one was a World War II submarine called the Sablefish. And then after I'd finished my tour on her, I was sent to a second one, which was called the Trout, and it had been built after World War II and tried to incorporate some of the advances that we had learned about near the end of the war. I was on that for only a short time when I got interviewed by Admiral Rickover for the nuclear program. I was one of the first 3 men in my Naval Academy class interviewed by him. And he did not select me. He selected people that were mostly older and more experienced. And so then what I did is I started trying to see where I might go. And I knew that the missile submarines were just starting to be developed. And I thought that what I would do is go to postgraduate school and get a education, advanced education in missile programs, so that perhaps I could get on a nuclear missile
And
submarine.
where did you go for this schooling? I mean,
I went to the U.S. Naval Postgraduate School, which is a fine school out in Monterey, California.
okay.
It was a 3-year program that got compressed to 2.5 years because of the urgency of getting us out into the fleet. Got a master's degree in electrical engineering,
Oh,
but we also studied aeronautical engineering and some of the other engineering factors that go into a missile.
what years are we talking? This 2.5 year program?
1958 to 1960.
So is the Cold War underway at that point?
Yes, yes,
Okay. All right. So you go to this full. I take it when you're going to this graduate program, you're doing this full time.
yes, full time.
Wow. Uh,
Yeah, we were working hard.
there's no doubt about it. I like your attitude. Audience, I'm going to get to it. And you see that I'm calling this fine human being and a fine American a father. Like I'm a Catholic, not exactly a good practicing Catholic, but a priest is called a father. We're going to get to that point in part 2 here. Just hang on. We'll get a little history on this fine man, and then we're going to kind of bring it into the fold of my perspective of law enforcement and things of that nature, criminal justice system, and what he is involved with today. All right, so you graduate this unbelievable program. And now, and you were talking about missiles being launched. Are you talking about above surface or beneath surface?
No, we launch them from below the surface.
Below the surface, okay.
They're blown up to the surface by air, compressed air.
Gotcha.
And then it's timed so that as soon as they get out of the water, the engines ignite, and then they take off.
Incredible. And are we leading up to when the USS, is it the Nautilus?
The Nautilus was the first nuclear submarine. Yes.
And that was deployed somewhere around 54.
Yes, she went out in January the 1st of 1954.
Did you ever serve on that, sir?
No, I've been aboard her, but I've never actually been underway with her.
Is that original sub around today?
No, she's well, she is as a visitor's location. People could go in and see her. They've taken a lot of the super stuff out, but they could go in and see what the submarine looks like. Yes.
Well, Pollak, I always had this question watching war movies and everything else, right? Why, I don't want to put you on the spot. Why do U.S. Navy refer to the ships as she? Does that still happen today, by the way?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, because we love our ships just like we love our women.
Ain't that something? Hallelujah. I got it. No, you don't got to say more. I don't want YouTube to erase me. I got it. I got it. No, that's a beautiful thing. Very simple question. It just dawned on me just now. Like I'm hearing you talk about she, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, let me answer this question. I never looked that up. I have to get up my chat GPT. All right, so you get out there, you go to the school. Now, give us let's kind of go through your quickly, because I want to get to the KAIROS program, and I'll tell the audience what that is in a second. Let's go through your naval program and your exit from the Navy. The rest of
Yes.
your
Well,
career. I'm sorry.
after I left postgraduate school, I went to a missile submarine that was being built. It was number 9th such ship, and I was the weapons officer. So we were in the shipyard for about a year and a half, uh, installing all the equipment, training our people on how to use it, because nobody that we had on the ship had any experience with missiles at all.
Mm.
And so we had to go through all the programs, all the equipment to learn how to operate it, how to maintain it. And then at the end of our shipyard period, when had finished our sea trials, we had to go down to Cape Canaveral and fire 2 missiles, and we did that. And then after that, we came back for any final work that needed to be done at the shipyard, and then we left on our first patrol, which was over in the North Atlantic. After that patrol,
Father, explain a patrol for the audience who don't know.
well,
Explain what
yes, the
that means.
patrol, we would go out with 16 missiles on board, and each of our missiles in those days could fly about 2,800 miles. So they
We're
were
talking hot warheads. I mean, we're talking.
Yes,
Okay, got
yeah, it was in the middle of the real
Oh,
tense situation with the Soviet Union.
okay.
And after that, I was called down to see Admiral Rickover again, and this time he selected me. And so I then went to nuclear power school and that's a 1-year program. And I had to qualify as a chief operator on a reactor plant. And then from there, I went to be executive officer number 2 on a missile submarine. And I was on there for a year and a half and was selected to be a captain of one of the missile submarines. So I took command of what was then almost a brand new submarine. I was the second captain,
Mm.
and that was in 1966.
Okay.
And I had her in command. I was in her command for 4 years until 1970.
Father, let me
So
stop you. I have a quick question here, and I'm sure the audience is thinking the same thing. Your training, it sounded to me, was outstanding. Your education and training. Who did that training? If nobody in the USN, the U.S. Navy, had missiles before, we're not familiar with the missiles before. Of course, the Air Force was flying, dropping missiles, right? So, who was your instructors?
well, we had people who had gone to the manufacturer. Lockheed was the manufacturer of the missiles,
Gotcha.
and we actually went to Lockheed plant and spent some time there with them.
Incredible.
And then we also went to the General Electric plant. They were the ones that had the computers and everything that were
Okay.
in Fort.
So
So
you're
we worked.
learning as you go. You're picking up all this new stuff.
Yes, yeah,
Go ahead.
and we had to learn not only the theory, but we also had to learn the practice. We had to be able to tear the equipment apart and put it back together again.
And
And
even
we
as a commander, you had to know what the operator. Now educate me here and the audience. What the operator who's operating a missile, what do you call it? A system, weapon system on a sub. Just what rank is he or she?
well, he's a senior lieutenant, which is equal to an Army captain.
Okay.
and the executive officer on the submarine is usually a lieutenant commander. That's the same as a major. And the captain of a nuclear submarine is generally a full commander, which is the same as a lieutenant colonel.
Colonel. Okay. Got it. Interesting. Wow, everybody's dialed up. All right. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was 35 years old when I took command of that ship, and I had 140 crew, and I had 16 missiles, and I had 48 nuclear bombs on board. So
Well,
that's a pretty big responsibility for a young kid that's 35 years
yeah,
old.
it sure is for anybody. Okay.
Yes.
I think we might have had somebody in the White House who couldn't handle that. That's very good. Yeah, that's pretty good. Well, were you at this point? Where are you? You said you went out to the Atlantic, correct? Are
Yes.
you all over the world? Are you at sea for how long at a time? At
Well,
patrol?
we would go out on patrol. We generally went out for about 72 to 75 days, actually
Okay.
submerged.
Okay.
But there would be a workup period of about 3 weeks to 4 weeks that we were on the ship and running all the equipment, getting ourselves back up, familiar with the things that might have changed. And also, we always had about 15 or 20% new crew members that had to be trained before we got underway. And their training would continue after we got underway. But
So
we were on patrol for generally about 72 to
70,
75 days.
and these subs are self-contained, meaning that you have some type of medical on there, and is there?
Yeah, in the early days we had a doctor. Normally
Okay.
they don't anymore. So we have a
Ah,
senior enlisted corpsman,
Corman.
and they're called independent corpsmen because they've gone through and gotten the qualifications to be alone and do things by themselves.
Okay.
And then we had supply people, we had cooks, we had all kinds of different people
Jobs
on board the ship, navigating people, and so forth. So uh, every man had an important job on the ship.
24/7 too. On top of that,
Yeah,
right?
24/7.
Did you have a chaplain of some
No,
sorts?
no,
None. Did that ever
Gen-
change?
no. Generally what happened is we would have a Sunday service,
Okay.
and either mostly it was the captain or the executive officer would conduct the service, but sometimes we had enlisted men who were very good, and they were selected to run the service. So
Interesting.
it just depended on backgrounds and who was interested.
To cover all face.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So let's take us kind of get to the end of your naval career and tell us how that went.
Okay. Well, after I left command, I had 3 different jobs in the Navy. The first job was the deputy program manager and the head of engineering of a new torpedo that was being developed, radically improved from what we had in World War II, called the Mark 48. And I took that through its final trials and selection and put it into production. And that's still the primary torpedo in the submarine force today, 50
Wow.
years later.
The Mark 48. And what year are we talking about? Don't get yourself in trouble now. I don't want them.
That was in about 1973.
73. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So
And
go
then
ahead.
and then from there I was selected to go to the office of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, where I was first a member, but then very shortly thereafter became the chief of the division, and we were responsible for all of the analytical work and the meeting with the people in the White House and in the State Department,
My goodness.
and then negotiating the SALT talks, the strategic arms limitation talks with the Soviets. I went over and participated in Geneva with the Soviets.
Oh, Pollak, were you based out of the Pentagon?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Wow.
And the head man that headed up the SALT talks at the time was Alexis Johnson, who was former ambassador to Japan, a very capable man. And then after I finished that job, I was assigned as a major program manager, and I had responsibility for all of the communication programs that supported the submarine force, and also one special program it supported all of the nuclear forces of the Air Force and the Navy. So
And what rank are you at this point?
we're what?
What rank?
I was a captain.
Captain. Okay. Based
Yeah.
out of the Pentagon for the most part.
Well, yes. Actually, we operated as a program manager. We operated in a building that the Navy rented
Mhm.
outside of the Pentagon because they didn't want our particular officers in the Pentagon, and there was a reason for that. So the only time that I was actually in the Pentagon was when I worked for the Joint Chiefs.
Father, did you and then we'll wrap up your naval career. What an unbelievable. I feel like I'm talking to an MIT scientist professor. Did you I'm going to make a statement, then you tell me if I'm wrong. Did you had adequate leadership, you had adequate training, more than adequate, from what I hear. You had a structured command staff, always ahead of you, direction where you were going. Am I correct?
Yeah, except that when we were out on patrol on the nuclear subs,
Okay.
we could not send any messages back unless it was an extreme emergency
Oh,
because they didn't want anybody to know where we were.
okay.
So we were given general orders, and I was told what areas I was to go into, and I had a certain amount of time to go from one area to another one. I was told what weapons, what targets I was to be assigned.
Okay.
And so I went out there and I basically conducted the operation by myself without any help from anybody ashore.
So you were given the responsibility of making those kind of commands. Am I right?
Yes, yes.
Wow. That's something. Is it, do you know, is you in touch with anybody today? Is that still the way it is?
It's still the way it is for the submarine force. Yeah,
For submarine force.
we're
Okay.
called the silent service. We
You had
don't
no doubt
talk.
about it.
We
And you
go out
obviously had
there.
no problem living in a building under the sea. Like it's
Yeah, right.
like you're walking around an office building in the Pentagon. Okay. Um, all right. So take us to your, unless you want to throw something else in there. I just had, that was just interested me that was your command structure. You always obviously respected it. There was camaraderie. There was respect for above you, whoever that may be, your admirals, whatever, and the orders coming from the White House. I would gather, right?
Yes.
Okay. And did politics have any? Did you see any effect of political effects on what you did
No,
during
not
your
at all.
tenure? Not at all.
Not at all. When I was head
'Cause you
of the
served under
office,
many presidents.
yeah. Well, when I was the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff department,
Okay.
I had many meetings with senators. I had,
Hmm.
and I'm talking one-on-one meetings. I
Hmm.
testified before the Congress. I had monthly meetings over in the White House. And one of the things that I found in those days was that always the politics stopped at the water's edge. There
Hmm.
was no difference at all between what the Republicans thought we should be doing and what the Democrats thought we should be
Interesting.
doing once we were talking about international negotiations and once we were talking about really the ability and the operation of the Department of Defense. It was very united.
Very good.
I
And
think
you
it's
always
not
had,
that way today.
and did you feel as though you were always had support in that arena?
Yes, I did. Uh,
Okay.
I
Okay.
used to have monthly meetings with the two ranking members
Mhm.
of the Foreign Relations Committee. One of them was Senator Scoop Jackson, who was the chairman of the committee. He was a Democrat from the state of Washington. And the ranking Republican was a man named Senator Arthur Vandenberg from the state of Michigan. I would meet in Senator Scoop Jackson's office, just the three of us. And we
Wow.
would spend an hour to an hour and a half every month talking about what the Russians were trying to do, what we were trying to do. And always there was a desire to make sure that if we got an agreement with the Soviets, it was going to be something that we military people could live with, and it was going to be at least favorable to us. So,
And
yeah, it was wonderful.
is it safe to say, correct me if I'm wrong in my tracks, is it safe to say that war was always looming in the background?
Oh, yes.
Okay. That's it. And it's pretty simple. I mean, it's just a thought process. And why would you be in that position if it wasn't, right? And not only that, but you yourself listening to this, which I have not heard, audience, uh, you were a command level, but you knew it all the way down to the bolts and nuts, which you were expected to know.
Yes,
Is that right?
exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
That doesn't
I
exist.
had to operate every major piece of equipment on the ship. I had to know how to do that.
All right, let's if there's anything else to add, give us your retirement and real quick, and then life after the Navy.
Yeah.
Don't go to the KAIROS yet. We'll get to that in a second.
Yeah, after the Navy, I left the Navy early because I felt that I needed to get away from Washington for a while.
Okay.
And the admiral that assigns brand new admirals, and I had a discussion, and he said that I needed to stay in Washington because I knew my way around Washington. He said better than just about anybody, including a lot of the senior admirals. And I pleaded with him that I wanted to get away for a couple of years at least, and then I'd be willing to come back. But I just felt like I needed to get away.
Okay.
And when it became clear that they weren't going to let me do that, I decided to accept an offer that I got from a large contractor. And I went out and began working for him as a vice president. I ended up working for 3 different companies. They were all involved in at least in part, in defense business.
Okay.
Ended up retiring as a senior vice president for a company called DRS, which was headquartered up near Oakland, New Jersey. And at that time, after doing that, I was getting up into the mid-50s in age.
Okay.
My wife and I had always wanted to go sailing, serious sailing. So I decided to retire a second time.
Which
and
is
we
what
bought,
age? What age?
I was 57.
Okay, 57. Okay.
And we went out and found a boat that we thought would be ideal. We bought it, sold our house, sold our cars, got rid of all kinds of stuff. And we moved on the boat, and we sailed it for 14 years.
You lived on a sailboat.
On a
I
sailboat
can't
for
even swim.
14 years.
You lived on a sailboat for 14 years. Sold
Yes, sir.
everything. Did
Yes.
you ever have a sailboat in all your?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a couple of sailboats, and my wife had grown up on the Chesapeake Bay, and she had done some sailing, so she was very capable. And
Okay.
after we got married, I had 2 different sailboats, and she was an excellent sailor. So she had never been out in the open ocean, but she'd done her sailing on the Chesapeake Bay. But it didn't take her long to under my tutelage to learn how to be an ocean
I guess
sailor.
not. What size? What are we talking? Give me a dimension of this thing. What are we talking? Noah's Ark? What are we talking about here?
Well, the boat
Sailboat.
was 52 feet long. It was
Okay.
what's called a staysail ketch. It had 2 masts, and it had a diesel engine. So when there was any wind, we could
Backup.
turn the
Okay.
engine on. We sailed the boat in the Caribbean, and then down into in the Bahamas we started, and then down into the Caribbean, down along the north coast of South America. And we went on down all the way down to the very southern part of Brazil. Spent 3.5 years in Brazil, and
You literally basically toured where you wanted to go the world, living
Yes.
on you and the bride, just you and the bride, right?
Yeah. Well, we had a dog on board with us.
A dog, that's good. Every man
We always had a
every man and
dog,
woman.
and that dog was good protection. We
Hon,
never had anybody giving us a problem.
there's baby boomers right now my age that I work with through my career, and they're drooling. And I talk to them all the time. I said, they're ready to punch. They're ready to step off the good ship government lollipop, right? And I said, look, it's a whole new world, brother. Well, if you're going to do it, so you always wanted to do it and you did it.
Well, I tell people, if you want to learn about long range sailing, I'm happy to talk to you anytime.
Father Pollak, and I'm sure the audience can see this, your attitude and your expression and your facial expression that I see on the side of the screen, and everybody else will soon see, is you obviously loved what you did. There's no question about it. I hope I'm not putting words in your mouth, but
No, I love what I did and I love what I'm doing.
wow. Well, here we go now, audience. We're going to go into the second part, which falls into the Angel Dog podcast, law enforcement, military retirees, and what they're doing today. So now, there's a program I'm talking to the audience right now, just to give them a little bit that I know from interviewing telephonically with this gentleman right here, this honorable gentleman. It's called the KAIROS program, KAIROS. Now, just to give everybody some indicator of, I've never heard of this, and I spent 34 years serving state, local, and federal, community, and international um, at the law enforcement level. And of course, we did operate with some military factions along the way. 3-year tour in special operations, which is can't talk about yet. But the bottom line is that I never heard of this KAIROS program. And this KAIROS program, and I'm going to just kind of give the audience, Father, an overview. It is a all faith backed, based around Christianity, came from the Catholic Church, program for those who are incarcerated in local and state institutions. Am I correct, Father?
Yes.
It's not at the federal level. We'll talk about that in just a little bit.
Well, it is.
It is. Go ahead.
It is in a few federal programs, and it's not actually in local jails, but it is in state and federal
correction.
prisons.
Okay.
Yes.
And it's not a one size fits all, but it's a retreat, and we're going to let the good Father tell us all about it. The reason I'm saying I never came across it, been in state, local, and federal institutions for one reason or another in my personal career, and I never heard about it from parole officers, from probation officers. I knew there were faith-based programs in various institutions, but I never heard this word KAIROS. So, Father, let's give us a background on KAIROS. It came from the Catholic Church, correct?
Yes.
And why don't you take us from where you told me about how it got to Florida, how many states are involved, how many countries?
Yes. KAIROS was started by Roman Catholics, and it was an offshoot of the Cursillo program. And some of the men down in a town called Rayford, Florida, which is west of Jacksonville, decided it would be a good idea to take the program into a state prison there. They went in and things were good, but they were having some difficulties for two reasons. One is that some of the procedures that they had in the Cursillo program were not very effective for people who were incarcerated in prison. And secondly, a lot of the inmates resisted going to the program because it was a Roman Catholic program only. And so the Cursillo office, because of these reasons, suggested that these men separate from the Cursillo program and make it an independent movement. And so they did, and they called it KAIROS, which is a Greek word meaning God's special time. It wasn't long before they came to realize that they needed to spread out and bring other Christians into the program. And so they began with what we call the mainline Protestant denominations, Methodist, Episcopal, Presbyterian, and so forth. And it eventually grew. And today we have all Christians who can ascribe to fundamental Christian beliefs. So we've got a broad cross section of people that are from different denominations. The program is now in about 38 states in our country. It's in 9 foreign countries. We have about 30,000 active volunteers.
30,000.
30,000 in the U.S.,
Okay.
not counting the nine
US.
foreign countries.
Okay.
And it's estimated that there has been something over 200,000 inmates who have gone through the program, which is a 4-day special program where they don't do anything else except go to this program.
Is that a retreat?
And
Is that sort of a
that's a
retreat?
retreat.
Okay.
Yes.
And
We
when,
call it a weekend, but it's a retreat.
excuse me, Father, does the institution, do you coordinate that whole
Oh,
lineup?
yes.
Okay. So,
Yes. And it,
1 second, could you just give your title, your position in this KAIROS program, please?
my position,
Yes.
well, my position in the KAIROS program is as a volunteer at the prison where I normally work, which is Ridgeland Correctional Institution,
But
the state prison.
aren't you on a board?
I was on the board.
Okay.
I was on the international board of directors,
Okay.
and I was the vice chairman of that board. But they have a procedure that you could only be on for so long because they don't want people becoming entrenched
Sure.
in these leadership positions. So I served my 2 terms on the board, and then I was brought back basically, or resigned back to being a worker again.
Well, you were at that command staff level. That's what I was getting at. You ended up, which is a definitely a character trait, Father. You ended up at command staff level, and
Yeah.
and you had no problem going back to what, a platoon leader, a rank and file.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. You had no problem doing that.
No, I had no problem doing that,
Okay.
and I think that KAIROS has been a complete life-changing experience for me. Uh,
So
I
let's
first got involved with it at a maximum security prison called Lieber in South Carolina, and at the time I became a volunteer there, we also had death row. The South Carolina's death row inmates were housed
Father,
there.
who again, back to your dad and back to you going into the Naval Academy, how did somebody come to you? Were you in church or your house of worship?
Yeah, I was in church, and there was
Okay.
a man who was about 10 years older than me
Okay.
that came to me and said he thought I should get involved with KAIROS. And I asked him what KAIROS was, and he said, "Well, it's a prison ministry." And I said, "You got to be out of your mind. I don't have anybody in my family that's ever been in prison. I don't know anybody that's ever been in prison. I don't want to know anybody that's ever been in prison, and I'm not going." And he kept after me and kept after me and kept after me. And finally, to shut him up, I said I would go. And I got into it, and I was just blown away. I saw people convert, and they were honest, genuine, deep conversions. And
So you had never been inside a state correctional facility
no,
of any type.
no, no, at no time.
And obviously you've never been arrested. Have you ever been, and please don't change your demeanor on this, but I'm just curious, have you ever been the victim of a personal crime?
No,
Anybody in your family?
no,
Okay, so you really were inspired by this gentleman,
I
or
was.
yeah. So
Yeah.
take me the first time you get and you get trained up, I guess, in some manner, correct?
Oh yeah, we go through a training process,
Okay.
it's very structured. There's definite things that we have to cover, and the team bonds together. And every time we go in on a weekend, which is generally twice a year at the prison that we're working in,
Twice a year.
every time you do that, you have to go through exactly the same training program again
Okay.
because you want everybody there to bond as a team. And everybody is assigned different jobs inside the prison during that weekend. There's a leader. There's a guy who's been a leader, who's there to provide advice if things start to go off the rail a little bit. And there's also another person who's going to be the next leader. But then we have tables that are set up where we have 6 inmates at a table and 3 volunteers. And every one of those tables has a table leader, it has an assistant table leader, and it has a clergyman. And the clergymen, of course, come from different denominations.
And Father, do you know who I want to call them students? What do you call your inmates? Students or
We call them residents.
residents? Okay. Do you know the dossier on each one of them before they come to you?
No,
Okay.
no. Now, I was a chaplain at that same prison. I'm working as a volunteer now, and when I was a chaplain, I had access to the computer, which would give me that information. But as a volunteer, I don't, and
Does
we don't
that
want to know.
Okay, you answered my next question. So their background, the background of the inmate, okay, has no bearing on you, obviously,
That's correct.
on your on the
We
Kairos.
don't ask them what they've done.
Okay,
Occasionally, particularly for the clergy, they may ask for a private meeting, and they'll tell us what they've done, but we never ask them.
okay, and so you're trying to develop a sense of community amongst them,
Yes.
the inmates. Um, do you explore their various space, or no, you don't concern with that?
No.
Meaning, okay,
What we're primarily doing is trying to explain to them why Jesus Christ came into the world, what he was trying to do, how the God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit work together, and the fact that they can be forgiven as long as they repent and they turn to the Lord Jesus Christ and ask for forgiveness.
and forgiveness and grace. Okay, that really is a summation of what the residents are getting out of this program, correct?
Yes.
And it has no bearing, and correct me, I'm just off the top of my head. There is no bearing whether they're going out to parole or probation in 2 years, 5 years. What about if they're sentenced to life or
Well,
on death row? It's two different things.
yeah. Well, as some of the people may be interested in knowing that we had two Kairoses in South Carolina up on death row, and all of those inmates we knew had been convicted of first-degree murder because that's the only punishment that allows for death sentence in South Carolina. So we knew about them, uh, but in terms of the other people, it doesn't make any difference. Some of them have got sentences without parole.
Okay.
Some of them are going to be getting out in a couple years. We do normally ask the chaplain who picks the inmates to have people who are going to have at least a year in prison after the weekend because we have monthly reunions with all of them and we continue to try to improve their understanding of all of these fundamental things and to encourage them to get involved with the church after they're released.
And Father, in the 2 times you said 2 times you go a year, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Do they have a support mechanism, or do they have the inmates have how do they stay up? How do they stay up with each other? Are they allowed to go back and forth with that?
Well,
The chaplain
they
run that?
they can't go back and forth except within their own living area. And at
Okay.
the prison where I work,
Okay.
there's about 150 people in each living area,
Okay.
and they can interact with each other. Also, we have a monthly reunion, we call it,
Ah,
where we go in and meet with them, and there are various talks that are given and so forth. And usually one of the talks at least is given by an inmate, and one is given by a volunteer. And so we try to integrate them in and make them feel a part of the Christian community so that when they are released, they feel more comfortable, hopefully, going into a church.
and when they're released, have you received as a Kairos program collectively, or yourself or your volunteers, have you received any feedback of when they go out into the community as to how they're doing?
Yeah, officially, we try to stay away from that.
Okay.
And there's a legal reason for that, but I don't think I need to get into.
Well, you don't have.
But because I was a chaplain and because uh, I have developed a good ability to interact with the inmates, I
Okay.
have had a number of them who've been able to contact me through my church, and I know how they're doing, and most of them are doing very well. A couple of them are not doing very well because they are just having real difficulties trying to get housing
Sure.
and they're trying to get jobs. And sometimes employers are just not willing to hire somebody that's been in prison.
Father, that's a hell of an undertaking. I'll tell you. Ooh, that really is sitting at the right hand of Unit One. I call it. But
Yeah.
I mean, that really for you and for them. And again, everybody, I've never heard of this program in over 3 decades of what I've experienced. I never even heard it mentioned, not once. How does the correctional facility staff, how do they relate to you? Do they?
Oh, they love us.
Okay,
They truly love us.
okay,
And the reason they do is that it's been clear to all of them that when we come into a prison with the program for the first time, that the situation in the prison starts to calm down considerably. And the more KAIROS graduates we get in the prison, the calmer it is, the fewer disciplinary problems they have.
okay.
And so uh, when we say we would like to do something, they are delighted to help us. We have a wonderful
Very good.
relationship.
And on that note, Father, does the staff partake? Are they allowed to partake? Is there one for the staff?
Uh,
A
the
program?
staff has to do certain things because, of course, they got to provide security.
Yes.
So they monitor all the food and things that we're bringing in.
Sure.
We also have at least one staff person who's there all the time, just in case a disturbance might happen.
Sure.
I've been doing this now for 22 years. I've never seen any problems.
Wow.
But there's always a staff person available, and he's got a walkie-talkie and so forth. So if something started to get out of hand, he could call for backup. But it's just been a wonderful program, and as I mentioned a little bit, I've done 2 weekends up on death row at KAIROS, and then I was one of 2 other people, 3 of us, that went up on death row every week for years. And I got to know some of those men up there and got to work with them, and I learned a lot about their backgrounds, and it just was really moving to me
Sure.
to find out how many of them grew up in dysfunctional homes. They had never gone to church. Many of them had no idea about God or anything either, of course, about Christ. And when some of those men began to learn what we were telling them, it was like a bombshell had gone off inside of them.
Hmm.
And I know at least a couple of them who have had their sentences commuted to life in prison with the possibility of parole. And one of the men that I worked with very closely is at the prison now where I'm a volunteer. He's got about 4 more years until he comes up to parole. And I don't think there's any doubt that he's going to get it because he has been a wonderful person.
Okay.
He's had a perfect disciplinary record, and everybody is very supportive of
Can
him and
you
what he.
can you be a ex-inmate, for lack of better terms? You've done your time, you're on parole, probation, you're out. Can you come back into the KAIROS program?
Uh,
Or is-
yes, you can.
Okay,
You have to be off parole,
okay.
and you have to be off of any kind of supervisory
Gotcha.
situation.
Okay,
And if you do that, you put in an application. You have to get approval from your local pastor, and then the local group of KAIROS people also have an opportunity to say yes or no. But we do have some former inmates that are on our team.
very good. And from a community of law enforcement or military career type people, are they involved in your program? Have you come across many of them?
Some. Let me just tell you a real quick story.
Yeah,
One of the
sure.
most difficult things I ever saw was when I was on a table here. Oh, it was probably 5 or 6 years ago now. And I noticed that one of the inmates was starting to become very emotional. And I
Agitated or depressed or what do you?
well, all I could see was he was welling up,
Okay,
and it looked like he was about ready to start crying.
okay,
And we have a private room we could take him to. And I got the table leader, and I said, you and I need to get this man and get him off here right now." And he didn't question me. He said, "Okay, let's go." So I got the man. We went off into the room. Well, he did break down. Right after we got him in the room and shut the door, he broke down. He started weeping uncontrollably. Turned out he had been a state trooper and had come home unexpectedly and found his wife in bed with somebody else.
Mhm.
And he pulled out his gun and shot and killed the guy.
Mm.
And he was in prison, and the other inmates did not know what his background was.
Mm.
Uh, and he was afraid that they might find out, and that could put him in jeopardy. But also, he was just horribly torn by the remorse over what he had done.
How old of a gentleman are we talking about?
He was probably about 35 at the time.
Okay. Okay.
So we run into some difficult situations.
So
But
in that case, Father, he was not a criminal. He was on the opposite side. And for lack of better terms, I'm no psychologist, but you learn after dealing with people from all walks of life, 3 decades,
yes,
the crime of passion that overwhelmed him.
yeah,
And
people can snap,
sure.
and
Oh my goodness.
I think one of the things that is most discouraging to me, and I hope this will resonate with your audience.
Sure.
We in the Lord's Prayer, we say, "Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us." We say that, but I don't think we really understand what it means, and we don't embrace it. Because if we're unwilling to forgive people, we're not following the commandments of our Lord. We're not following the commandments of God. Um, Jesus Christ was asked right near the end of his life by one of the legal experts of the Jewish people, what is the most important commandment? And I think he probably thought, you shall not murder, or you shall not commit adultery, or whatever. But Jesus answered him in a way that I think is tremendously profound. He said, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment, and the second is like unto it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself." And if we don't follow those, and then he said, those two commandments contain all the laws that you need to know.
Mm.
If you follow those two laws, you will have done everything that God the Father wants you to do.
Father, and I should have asked this in the beginning, when you first got into the KAIROS program, where were you, how do I say this? Where were you on the religious scale? Where read the Bible every day, go to church every week? Give me an urban,
No,
urban.
I was
Give
I
me
was
something.
what I would call a
I'm a
very
bad Catholic. Give me something.
yeah, well, I would say that I was a very mediocre Christian. I didn't do any of those things. I went to church on Sunday,
Okay.
and I took my children to church because I thought it was the right thing to do.
Okay.
But I was not a Bible reader. Uh, I
Okay.
got involved with religion through KAIROS.
Wow.
And the more I got involved and saw what was happening and how these people were reacting, I started becoming convinced that I needed to devote my life much more to God.
So you started this, you're 94. Let me make sure I got this right. 22 years, right? My public education parochial school math, you were 72?
72 when I started KAIROS. I went
72?
to see my head priest when I was about 75.
Good Lord.
And I said, I feel like I'm being called to the ministry. And so they put me through a 6-month program where I had to go through up to a committee and meet with them every week. And at the end of that time, they said, "Yes, we think you're right." And the bishop then interviewed me and he agreed. And I started my program and I was ordained as a priest at the age of 79.
79. So, okay. So kind of we've documented the program. We know what it is now. It's a success, I would put it, correct?
A huge success,
A
yes.
huge success. 30,000 volunteers, 38 states, 9 countries, all denominations. You, if I'm going to put you on the spot, you as a man, the man that stepped into this arena at, let's say, 72, and you became an ordained priest in 79. What's your daily life difference? What's a day other than going to the to the incarcerated institution and doing your Lord's work, literally the Lord's work, KAIROS program. What's your personal? Do you do anything different than you did?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Number one is I have a daily routine of prayer.
Okay.
Primarily in the morning. I get up before my wife does, and I spend about an hour in Bible studies and prayers.
Solitude, yourself.
Yes,
Okay.
just myself.
Gotcha.
And I do a service, a communion service at my church every week on Wednesday afternoon. I go to the prison, of course, quite frequently. I go to a nursing home every week and meet with the people there.
Wow.
Um, we have Bible studies, and once a month we do a communion service. So I'm pretty active.
You're
I'm
pretty active.
also,
I mean,
yeah,
you're really active.
yeah, yeah. There's a lot of people say
You,
they're surprised at how active I am.
you're I'm just wrapping up a couple of things here, audience, but Father Pollak and his wife are now vegans. Am I correct? If I'm allowed to say that
Yes.
without getting locked up or something. You're in good health, you yourself. I know about your wife.
Yeah, my wife has Alzheimer's, as I think I mentioned. She's
Yeah.
had it for over 10 years, but that's unusual because generally most Alzheimer's patients are dead within 7 to 8 years after they're diagnosed. And she's now 10 and a half and still going strong. Um, my health, especially for a guy my age, is pretty remarkable. I'm still driving, of course, and
Drive,
getting
okay.
around and doing all
Get
these
around.
things. So I don't. I keep telling people, Brian, that I'm really not 94. The doctors made a mistake when they made up my birth certificate,
Well, I say
and
the same at my
they
age, but
put
my
the wrong
joints
they
don't.
wrote, put the wrong year down.
I got you. What could you Father, this is you're an amazing man, amazing human being. Your father was the same. You both served, and now you're serving again. You're serving the ultimate commander now, if I may say,
Yes.
the Lord. But I mean, well, you always were, I think, to some degree. Because isn't there something in the Bible that the protectors will sit at the right hand? Isn't there something in there about that? Saint Michael?
Yes.
Okay. Anyway, what would you say in summary, and for all of us, A, I'll say a couple things. You chime in. You always did what you wanted to do. Am I correct? For the most,
Yes.
including the sailing around and going to Brazil and the
Yes.
whole thing of selling the house and the car and all that. That's a big decision, by the way. And as opposed to what? Sitting on the couch and watching whatever they had back then, Netflix. Number two, you're contributing to your community. The good Lord is allowing you to drive and get around, okay, and you're taking care of. How do I say this respectfully? Of men and women. Oh, by the way, do you do women? I didn't ask that.
KAIROS is in women's prison, but it's only women that go in for that. So
Gotcha. Okay.
I used to be able to go into a prison where my wife was a volunteer, a women's prison for the reunions, but we're not even allowed to do that anymore.
Understandable. So the bottom line is you have been placed on this earth for a reason. I'm preaching to the choir, literally. It meets you at the head of the choir. So for the rest of us, and I don't know if you ever dial up, I'm sure you don't even have time, don't even worry about it. There's these gentlemen my age and women walking around on YouTube holding their phone, right? Holding their phone and talking about don't retire, don't do this, don't do that, don't sit on your butt, go get involved in something like you are, or not even what you're doing, you're way and above. But the bottom line is you are living life to the last breath and you're contributing back to everybody. And you have a great attitude. I'm just looking at you. You have a great friggin' attitude. You're smiling and you're taking care of yourself, taking care of your wife. And we finally figured out how to get on this damn Zoom for you too. And can you give us a summary By the way, do you ever hear from anybody from your 52 naval class?
Oh,
Naval,
yes. Oh,
you
yes.
do. So they're still
Yeah.
around.
Not too many of them are left. We're down to about 60 now.
Okay, you do
But-
hear from them though.
Oh, yes. Yeah, we have a system set up where we can communicate with each
Beautiful. So you have human interaction,
other.
have interaction with God every day, and you're passing that on to your parishioners in your community. Well, look, yeah, I won't say his full name because he's going to get an interview also, but our mutual friend Ron
Yes.
is how I discovered you. And then when I heard the story, I said, we have to talk about him. Sarah, what can I say? I'm humbled. I got to do more than work on my hot rods. You really, I mean, it's very impressive. You never dropped the hammer once. Never. I mean, MIT, all that kind of stuff, and grad school. It's incredible. And you're a commander, so people were looking up to you all the time. And when you got to the Pentagon level, you were left with making some major friggin' decisions on your own. And you never doubted yourself, I gather. Correct?
Yeah. Now, I would like to conclude, I guess,
Go
with
ahead.
one thing, Brian,
Please.
and that is if I had to change my life, the thing that I would really want to do is to get much more involved with my religion and with my Lord that I did. I got into that primarily because I had this friend who kept insisting that I needed to do it, and it was after I had resisted over and over and over again, and I got into it. I thought, my gosh, why didn't I do this years ago? Uh, my life has completely changed as a result of what has happened to me. And I think it's made me a much better person, a much more understanding person, a much more sympathetic person. So, my suggestion is that instead of just, as you say, walking around with your cell phone and doing things like that, think about ways in which you can get closer, more active in your church, areas where you might be interested in getting out and getting involved with the larger community. It's never too late to start doing that. And when you can help somebody out, somebody that really needs help, you will be blessed beyond belief.
Unbelievable, Father. And you know what? That, what you just said, is what all these retirement seminars and all these different things that are out there on the digital scene say to do. Give back, and that will be the biggest reward you're ever going to get.
Yes.
I failed to mention it. We didn't talk about it because I couldn't find it. Father Pollak was interviewed by Dan Rather. Am I correct?
Yes.
On 60 Minutes, 1976-ish.
1977 or 1978. I don't remember.
Did you ever find? You said you had a copy of it?
I have a copy of it. I haven't found it yet, Brian, but
Okay, all right.
I'm going to look for it.
Well,
But
sir, the last hour and 13 minutes have been absolutely unbelievable. You are a gentleman, a commander, and I know the difference between those are two different things, actually. I guess they could be all at one, and a man of faith. And I need to get with the program. But thank you very much. And for now, I'm going to sign off. And then I'm gonna find that music why it didn't play. I'm going to put an additional intro into this, and you'll see it in a little bit. Okay? Take care. God bless.